So, as the participants are joining in, I'll give a quick intro to this conversation, Impact Conversations with Aavishkaar Group. First of all, a very warm welcome to everyone for joining us for the episode 6 of Impact Conversations with Aavishkaar Group. This is organized in partnership with Asian Venture Philanthropy Network, AVPN. I'm Soumya. I lead Impact and ESG at Aavishkaar Capital. To give you a quick introduction to Aavishkaar Group, the group started in 2001 and is a global pioneer in taking an entrepreneurship-based approach towards development. The group is focused on developing the impact ecosystem in the continents of Asia and Africa. So today, the group manages assets in excess of USD 1.2 billion across equity and credit, with 7,000 plus employees present across India, Indonesia, Bangladesh, and Kenya. Earlier this year, the group released its Impact Report 2020, which brings together stories of 12 powerful women leaders from across the regions and the impact they have created in their communities and family. So, post this report launch, we felt it was important to continue to delve deeper into understanding what constitutes as impact to individuals, to stakeholders, and across geographies and sectors. We therefore launched Impact Conversations with Aavishkaar Group, with an aim to bring together leaders, social entrepreneurs, investors, and other stakeholders in the impact community to share their best practices, collaborate, and take actions to create a more inclusive and sustainable world. So today's episode of the Impact Conversation will focus on a very important topic, the future of responsible investing. The impact created by impact investments or funds has been quite evident, and more people are seeing value in this. We believe that impact investments or responsible investments is going to shape the next decade based on how we strike a balance between risk, return, and impact. Please join me in welcoming incredible leaders with diverse experience in making such investments, in building successful impact enterprises across geography. Jayesh Parekh, who joins us from Singapore, needs no introduction. He's a serial entrepreneur, angel investor, and impact investment expert. He has invested and worked with many companies and individuals to help them apply a more entrepreneurial mindset and approach to their existing businesses. At present, he's the managing partner of a very interesting venture firm, Good Startup, that is focused on investing in the alternative protein sector. Jayesh is also the co-founder of Sony Entertainment Television. Welcome, Jayesh. It's a
Thank you so
pleasure
much,
to have you.
Soumya. Thank you so much.
Janvi Papriwal is an investor, development enthusiast, cheerleader of entrepreneurship, and an activist citizen. She's an investment director at Aavishkaar Capital, a global leader in impact investing, undertaking deal sourcing, execution, and exits. She also partakes in and leads the sector-specific efforts from a fundraising perspective. She actively engages in board activities and decision making of portfolio companies to guide and assist the management in achieving long-term goals. Welcome, Janvi.
Thanks, Soumya. Very happy to be here. Thanks.
Komal Sahu serves as the Chief of Sustainable Finance at AVPN. She leads AVPN's engagement with family offices, private wealth holders, HNIs, corporations, and financial institutions across Asia. In this capacity, she helps these stakeholders achieve their objectives of investing within a framework of impact and sustainability. Over the last decade, Komal has provided support to a number of social enterprises and charities across Asia. She's an angel investor and an LP in early and late stage funds. Thanks for joining us to moderate this session today, Komal. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Soumya. Great introduction to everybody on the panel. And also thank you to Aavishkaar for asking AVPN to be part of this conversation. We all know responsible investing is a strategy. It's a practice to incorporate environmental, social, and governance factors into investment decisions, and involves an active ownership of those assets. Jayesh, you've been part of this investment ecosystem well before the terms responsible investing, impact investing came about. What have you observed in your time in this space? And have you witnessed significant shifts in the investor psyche?
Thank you, Komal, and thank you, Aavishkaar and AVPN, for inviting me to be part of this panel. Komal, this impact investing is continuing to spread worldwide. It started in a pioneering effort with folks like Aavishkaar a couple decades ago, but it's continuing to spread worldwide. Impact investing is basically just differentiating that from responsible investing. And again, we can discuss this further, is investing in a company with an intent to make impact, right? So just fast forward this year itself, right? In April 2021, New York Life announced a $1 billion impact investment fund. In May 2021, Harvard Business School announced an impact investment fund. So it's just growing. It's also growing in Southeast Asia and in Africa. And in March 2021, World Economic Forum reported that impact investment grew tenfolds in a decade to 25 billion in Latin America. So the march of impact investment is surging ahead. Now, I think a piece of it is also that investors now are recognizing that the IRR in this space can be as good as that in mainstream investing. They're convinced that there is good and sustained deal flows, and of course, importantly, exits in the impact investing space. So for anyone interested in, of course, data or IRR and exits, I'm sure there is plenty of it available now. And maybe you, Komal, or Janvi can help them depending on what specifically they're looking for. For example, there is geographic sector, there is returns versus degree of impact, and then it's a vertical sector, people are interested in. The third point is that the angel investors and family offices, and particularly millennials, they like the mission-driven investment thesis of responsible and impact investing. So many more angel investors and family offices are subscribing to impact investment funds in various parts of the world. And many of these are investors who are also co-investing, right, along with the funds whenever allocations are available in this space. And my last limited point is that while impact investing has grown significantly in the past decade, it is yet to become a mainstream asset class.
I agree with you there, Jayesh. I mean, there is still a long, long way to go. Janvi, this is where Aavishkaar has a major role to play. It's a pioneer in the impact investment space. And again, someone who's been there even before the term was coined. You've got some very high impact businesses and you've been scaling them. Tell me about Aavishkaar's impact investment philosophy as well as your journey into it.
Sure. So firstly, I'd like to say that impact investing is one term, and we often hear about impact and investing, being considered as disparate. But it's one single term, be it responsible investing or impact investing. And impact investors are ones who invest in entrepreneurs who solve complex social problems with a commercial intent. Now, them solving a complex problem may make them sound like a venture capital investment, but them solving social problems is what makes them impact investments. And one may argue that a lot of enterprises, create impact because of the livelihoods that they generate. But impact investments uplift low-income communities, and this is embedded in their business models. And it's way beyond just generating livelihoods. And that's a distinction which I wanted to, make right up front. Coming to Aavishkaar Capital, we've been at the forefront of impact investing in India. We've expanded to Southeast Asia and now even Africa. We've made about 70 investments in the regions and made about 35 exits. And talking about Aavishkaar Capital's philosophy, we look at impact as either direct or indirect. When we make direct impact, we talk about beneficiaries, being communities such as the suppliers, the vendors, or even the employees who are most directly and instantaneously impacted by these business models. Whereas indirect impact benefits, the communities and the beneficiaries get impacted over a period of time, and the benefits keep accruing as time progresses and as business models and the entire sector evolves. And hence, these benefits are leveraged over a longer period in time. So these would be impact over the entire ecosystem, over the entire sector, or the entire economy. I will demystify this a little more when we talk about specific examples and some of our companies. And also, as impact is embedded in the business model that we invest in, impact screening, evaluation, and even projecting of impact KPIs are an essential part of assessment of the business metrics and the viability of the financial model. So some of the target sectors and themes that we target, from Aavishkaar Capital Investment perspective, are ones that are at the confluence of entrepreneurial talent, technology, and wherein a right amount of capital can have the potential to solve some of the very complex social problems at scale. And talking about India in further detail, because that is the region I focus on, we have a vast population and a large quantum of it continues to be low income. And the impact of COVID has further pushed development back in time. So we believe there are multiple sectors in which impact investments can be made, such as financial inclusion, food and agriculture, healthcare, education, logistics, climate, handicraft, etc., etc. But some of the sectors which are core to Aavishkaar are financial inclusion and sustainable agriculture. And we can talk more about it, Komal, as we move forward.
How long have you been involved with this in this space, Janvi?
I've been with Aavishkaar for nearly 4 years now, and some of the sectors that I work closely are in sustainable agriculture and some of the emerging themes in climate. Happy to talk more about agriculture if I have your permission, Komal.
We'll delve further into it as we continue the conversation. Jayesh and Janvi as well, we've seen a lot of traction and focus around impact investing, as well as responsible investing. Do you see certain sectors, this is to you, Jayesh, turn out more innovations such that they address the issue of conscious capitalism better than others? You're on mute, Jayesh.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry. I think first point I want to make is that many venture capital funds are trying to attract DFIs and conscious capital by including SDG in their fund thesis, right? So it will be interesting to see, if investors get swayed by such SDG add-ons in their main fund, right? Or if they'll swoon towards impact-only funds. Obviously, impact-only funds are sort of, pure thoroughbreds who've been at it now for years and years, and it's not really just a kind of a bait and switch to say, okay, let's include SDG so that we can get more funding in these VC funds. As for innovation, I see that fintech, health tech, agri-tech, and then specifically food tech, and then of course we can get Janvi to come in here, but they definitely look poised to innovate, because it intersects with multiple impact points, right? So it's climate and environment and food and agriculture, health, nutrition. So it sort of is sort of the jet stream, if I may say, especially agri-tech and food tech. So agri-tech and food tech, which is my passion now, is innovating with a vigor like never seen before, right? So you've got plant-based alternative proteins is gaining momentum. However, cell-based and fermentation-based alternative proteins is really going to be a game changer. Right? Okay, it's not 2-3 years down, maybe it's 5-10 years down the road. But when it has that transition and it gets all the approvals, right, regulatory approvals, I think that will be a game changer. And this is across meat, seafood, dairy, eggs, and it's across the world. And there are major hubs forming like USA, Israel, Berlin, England, Singapore, and a few other emerging locations. So. Over to you, Janvi.
Yeah, talking more about agriculture, and we have our thesis here. So India has about 150 farmers, 150 million farmers, and 85% of them are like small and marginal. From an impact perspective, they have practically no purchasing power of agricultural imports. They purchase in small quantities, they produce their outputs in small quantities, they have limited access to markets. They're often at the mercy of traders who are interested in maximizing their own profits. And to add to that, there is information asymmetry, there is limited access to authentic and appropriate inputs, there's low mechanization, low irrigation levels, poor village level micro warehousing facilities. And all of this makes the farmers very vulnerable to the vagaries of nature. And hence they often land up with poor yields and low realizations for their produce. And hence, there's a lot of intervention that can be made to increase the farmer's income and create a lot of impact at scale. And to think of it, when it comes to technology, a lot of capital from VCs and PEs has kept pouring into enterprises that have made lives of urban populace more comfortable, and the way we function and our business is smarter. But these marginalized communities, especially farmers, function pretty much the way they've been functioning over the last 5 decades. Making their business of farming very inefficient, non-lucrative, and that's why, despite agri employing nearly 40% of India's population, they contribute to just 15% of India's GDP. And even from a climate perspective, India is a massive producer and consumer of rice and wheat, and we're also the largest exporter of rice. That's great, but are they really good for health and environment? That's a big no, right? Because these crops guzzle a lot of water. They don't even provide the right amount of nutrition. So as of today, India stares at a population of about 5 billion by 2050. And today, 30% of the current population is undernourished. So there's a looming water crisis and there's a looming food security crisis. And all of this calls for urgent and pressing needs to shift towards sustainable agricultural practices. And hence, this presents a large, complex social and environmental problem that I was referring to and Aavishkaar Capital would love to solve for. But having said that, there are several positives also in the agricultural sector. India is the second largest producer of fruits and vegetables in the world. We're also the largest producer of milk in the world. The size of the entire agricultural sector in India is about $350 billion. So that's really huge numbers we're talking about. And from a demand side perspective, we're seeing a lot of interesting trends. There's urbanization, there's widening of the upper and middle class, the dietary habits are changing. They have preferences for healthy and packaged foods, branded foods, and most importantly, there's rising awareness about health and wellness, especially post-COVID. And with e-commerce democratizing sales channels, there's this immense potential for brand play along with food technology. And parallel to that, we also have the government extending their support towards increasing farmers' incomes, favorable policies, financial and infrastructure support. And most importantly, with technology, with the rise in smartphone and data penetration, and with the app usage of digital technology, business models can now penetrate to the hinterlands without being challenged by physical or logistical intervention. So all of this coming together, the demand side trends, technology, government's active support, it's all creating a very favorable environment for innovations in the agricultural sector, which can potentially solve for the social and climatic challenges which I was referring to. And then there are talented individuals who are taking up the entrepreneurial leap, and there are VCs and Ps who are now entering this space. And hence this entire ecosystem has really come to a level where it can really go to the next level now. And Aavishkaar Capital has been a proponent of the agri sector, but with widespread interest, there's now an enabling environment being created for a lot of enterprises to scale. I can talk about a couple of case studies from Aavishkaar portfolio, which I've personally managed. Komal, if that's fine, we can go ahead.
Yes, please do. Go ahead, Janvi.
Sure. So I can talk about Soulful. So this is a company which is into packaged foods, millet-based packaged foods. Now, a few decades back, Indians used to consume millets as part of the regular diet. Millets, by the way, consume a fraction of the water required by paddy. They can grow with a few showers of rain. They do not require irrigation, and they need minimal fertilizers and pesticides. and they are extremely nutritious, making them ideal crops, not just for the marginal farmers, but they're also good for the soil environment as well as the consumers, and thus solving for the water and nutrition crisis that I was talking about. But with rice and wheat taking over the green revolution in India, and rightly so at that point in time, these wonderful grains, called millets, over a period of time kept losing their popularity. Now we realize it's not possible to convince a farmer to stop growing, rice and wheat and switch to millets. We can't even convince the consumer to, stop having rice and wheat and start having millets overnight. So to generate that demand, a market-led intervention is required. And that's what exactly we did in Soulful. It's a packaged foods company centered around millets, and with agronomical support, food technology, and a lot of R&D, they were able to transform coarse millets into a basket of tasty, healthy, convenient, and aspirational products, such as breakfast cereals, snacks, milkshakes, etc., that appeal to the masses. Now, following the success of this brand, there were several other startups as well as incumbents, large food companies. They started launching millet-based products, and farmers now, are happier growing millets because there is a growing demand for millets. So now the Soulful has been acquired by Tata Consumer Products, and Tata Consumer Products have the intent and the capability to scale this company nearly 100 times, what it was as part of Aavishkaar portfolio. So even the social and environmental impact that this company was able to create by our meager investment now starts becoming extremely, extremely significant. So this is a perfect example, I would say, of not just a responsible investment, but also a responsible exit, and indirect impact, which gets leveraged over a period of time as the company scales and as the sector and the ecosystem further expands.
You know,
I'd also like to talk.
Sorry, go ahead.
I'd also like to talk about our dairy investments in Milk Mantra and HR Food, since we are talking about the agri sector. So the states of Odisha and Jharkhand are among the significantly low-income states of India. And large portions of these lands, were inhabited by tribals, and they did not have milch cattle, and they didn't know how to rear them. These states also, have least, I would say, dairy consumption compared to, all India levels, low per capita dairy consumption, I would say. And they had dairy brands that would not inspire trust. So there was a developmental challenge at the back end and an immense commercial opportunity to create a good, ethical brand at the front end. Again, making a case for opportunity to make an impact investment. So at Milk Mantra, we tapped into this demand-supply gap as well as a quality gap. And as we speak, Milk Mantra has developed the largest private premium dairy brand in the state of Odisha. So again, talking about the backend, they built a 100% direct procurement network with farmers, where they train the farmers, support them with buying cattle, provide them with good quality cattle feed, guarantee purchase of whatever milk they produce, and use technology to give farmers a price that is linked to the quality of the milk that they offer. And they make payments within 5 days of them pouring milk. So all of this is enabled through digital transactions and through usage of technology. So basically, the marginal farmers now have a reliable stream of additional income of nearly 5 to 10,000 a month, which is very significant from them because they've been having small farms, and with a capital investment of a couple of cattle, they're able to make an additional income, which is almost as good as a sole income for them. And this is truly transformational, right? Because in dairy, whatever revenue a brand generates, nearly 45% of it goes into the hands of the farmers. And those who think that employment generation is also impactful, mind you that the employee expenses in the P&L of any large corporate can range anywhere between 2 to 25% of the revenues. And for most of the organizations, chunk of it goes to the senior management, leaving really half of it going to the employees or even low income employees. Let us assume that is 6%. So we're talking about 6% here and nearly 45% in a dairy. And that's a huge difference. And if the dairy brand of the dairy company continues to grow at 30, 40, 50% year on year, then the absolute number of farmers and the absolute amount of income that flows into the hands of these farmers also continues to grow to that extent. So this is, I would say, a perfect example of impact investment, where we bring together, the developmental impact that we want to create at the back end, as well as a commercially successful model at the front end. So yeah, these were the couple of examples I wanted to share from our portfolio.
No, very inspiring, truly impactful entities. And Jayesh, Janvi raised a very pertinent point about the growth in the population. Food security being an issue, not just for India, but globally. Now, I know you've invested in an alternative protein fund. If you can tell us more about it, and what was the inspiration behind investing in this fund?
Sure. So first of all, Good Startup is a venture fund, a firm that focuses on investments in the alternative protein sector. So alternative proteins, I just want to give you a little background. It is disrupting the $2 trillion global market for animal agriculture, constituting meat, seafood, dairy, and eggs, by creating sustainable protein-rich ingredients sourced from plants and microorganisms or animal tissue culture, right? So these are the three basically verticals within the alt protein space. And that's basically to replace conventional animal-based sources. Currently, alternative proteins only is 1%. So out of 2 trillion, it's only $20 billion in size, right? But this will grow to by about 10% to by 2030, let's say, to about 200 billion. And by 2050, when the population is about 10 billion, with a substantially larger middle class, right, where meat consumption will nearly double. And so as a result, animal agriculture will no longer be able to support. I mean, this is just the equation, the math doesn't work, right? So it just won't support the protein requirements. And alternative proteins are projected to take 30 to 60% by then. So even if it's 30%, that's about $1 trillion. So it's a massive jet stream that has just gotten started, right? It's a sort of, this is like the mid 90s for internet. The animal agriculture industry is currently, responsible for about, let's say, 14.5% of the global warming. So it's more than the transportation sector also. It is the leading cause of deforestation, ocean dead zone, species extinction. So the sector consumes a third of our land, as Janvi had said, and water, and remains a major contributor to human disease and utilizes 80% of all antibiotics, right? So in the process, we kill 70 billion land animals and over 1 trillion fish, right, every year. And in many cases, after immense suffering. So the promise of alternative protein is to reduce the global emissions by 90%, while using only 80%, while using about 80% less energy and 90% less water, 99% less land. So that's really the attraction of it, right? It's the need of the hour. There is no other alternative, it doesn't seem. And of course, there is social impact. Now, our fund, which is called Good Protein Fund, is about it'll become a 25 to 30 million US fund. We're already at 25 now. It's a venture fund that only invests in alternative protein. So I think that's the interesting part, which is that it is narrower in focus. So we do not invest in insect farms, for example, right? We don't think shifting from animal farms to insect farms is a sustainable long-term strategy, right? So we also do not invest in food e-commerce or online marketplace or food delivery services, etc. Right? We are sharply focused on food, which is basically meat, seafood, dairy, eggs, and also we invest in plant-based in materials also, by the way. So leather, silk, wool, right? So those are some examples, and also pet foods. So our simple impact thesis is to try to take the animals out of the food chain. We invest in the plant-based, cell-based, and fermentation, or recombinant, as it's called, alternative protein technologies, and we invest worldwide. So we will invest in early stage and late stage companies, and we also have a one-to-one reserve for companies that are winners, and so that we can double down on those. And so it's a multi-stage fund, and we've already invested in about 10 companies, and you can visit goodstartup.com essentially to learn more about it.
Jayesh, I have a lot of questions because this is a really interesting sector. I mean, do you think consumer, demographics being a key component of it, the younger generation is more interested in trying something new? The middle-aged housewife may not pick up an alternative protein, I guess, packet and put it into her shopping basket. And also that younger generation tends to be a bit more fickle, a bit more fad-like in what their choices are. How do you see consumers changing their pattern in how they consume these alternative proteins? And also, again, the price point. That's the interesting fact that, you know, what an Impossible Meat burger costs you versus, we discussed before, a McDonald's vegetarian patty. There are two different price points. How do you make it something that could be incorporated and sort of form part of the consumer patterns in developing markets?
Yeah, so there's a bunch of questions in there, Komal, and I'm going to try and remember some of them, but let me start. And Janvi, please help me. You know, if you have speeds and feeds, it's really important. So just first to do with millennials, by the way, in America alone, you know, 79% of millennials have tried these plant-based and all protein, you know, meats. On a daily basis, weekly basis, the number I have is like about 39% of them consume it, you know, on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. So I think millennials definitely are really the key to the future of this particular space, in my personal opinion. As far as the mothers are concerned, I think, look, at the end of the day, it's you know, there is a famous phrase in this space which says, "Taste is king and price is queen," right? So as long as the taste is there and the price is there, the thing that the mother is basically looking for is nutrition, right? So if there is nutrition in it, and the price is affordable, then the only thing left is, will the family like the taste of it, right? And so that's really the future. And there are so many companies all over the world, right, who are trying to come up with alternative products, whether it's in the meat, the red meats, the chickens, and the seafood. And of course, you know, even just chicken nuggets, it's just mind-boggling. There are like a dozen good chicken nugget companies out there, right, all over the world, and they're all sort of fighting for that space. So I really wish I had the crystal ball, Komal, because if I did, and if I knew how the behavior of the consumer is going to be, then you know, everybody should invest in our fund. But that's the beauty of a venture capitalist industry, right? Is that we're trying to look at the data, you're looking at the consumption pattern, but also the technology. In this space, technology is going to be really incredibly powerful. So again, I compare it to mid-90s of internet, right? And in mid-90s internet, there was no cloud and there was no Amazon Web Services and there was no Google and Apple and Alphabet and all of that, right? So, you know, look at this 5 years, 10 years from now. You know, will they only be the Beyond Meats and Impossible and Oatly, Eat Just? These are the 4 or 5 unicorns right now, maybe a dozen in the next 1 year. But can you imagine 2, 3, 5 years from now when all the strategics also get involved in it, right? I mean, you saw recently Nestle invested, Cargill has been investing in it, Tyson's been investing in it. I mean, they see the writing on the wall, right? They've changed their company names from, you know, they're not a meat company anymore. They're protein companies, right? They're renaming, rebranding themselves as protein companies. So across the board, the writing is on the wall, and I couldn't really pick whether cell-based meat is going to be the winner, but there is a huge promise in that technology. So technology is really going to be the key at the end of the day. If you know, whoever and however many people in the world in different ways can crack the cell-based you know, space, I think that's going to be huge. Right now, of course, plant-based is just winning hands down, and fermentation also has a huge promise. But I'd love to hear, you know, Janvi, if you have any comments.
Janvi,
yes.
you're definitely looking at new sectors, so please tell us about them.
No, absolutely. Fully agree with you, Jayesh. And in fact, even in India, we are closely watching this space. There are startups who have come up in India offering very interesting products in both plant-based and cell-based, and we are watching them closely as well.
You guys, Janvi, if I'm right, are in the process of raising a new fund. What's going to be the focus of that fund, and what's going to be your role within it?
Sure. Yes, we are looking at raising our next fund, and we would continue to focus on our target sectors of financial inclusion, sustainable agriculture, and the host of other sectors, including healthcare, education, logistics, climate, etc. And my focus would be on food and agriculture as well as climate. And yes, apart from the sectors we've been talking about, there's several other themes coming up in agriculture around health and wellness, including food as well as non-food agri-processing, Agri-tech has shown a lot of promise, including models around stakeholder digitization, smart farms, novel farming techniques, soilless farming, protected cultivation, organizing supply chains in agri, dairy, poultry, fisheries, meat, etc. And apart from sustainable agriculture within climate, what I'm personally looking very closely at is electric mobility. Yeah, very, very different from what we've been talking, but I would like to touch upon that as well. So India is, a $120 billion auto market. In fact, the fourth largest auto market globally. And this is despite, India having extremely low per capita car ownership. So this is just going to go up. But unfortunately, 14 out of 20 of the most polluted cities in the world are in India. So needless to say that from a climate perspective, EVs hold tremendous promise. And there are also many other benefits of EVs. If you are an oil importer, you cut your national import bills by switching to EVs. So from a business viability perspective as well, with improvements in battery technology, development of charging infrastructure, government support, and most importantly, EV is becoming more affordable. Rather, I'd say, they started becoming less unaffordable. The adoption curve would only rise from here. Hence, I believe we are at a cusp of transformation, and this probably is the right time to invest in this space, especially when we're targeting liquidity in 5 to 7 years. And within EVs, we think the low hanging fruits are in the two-wheelers and the three-wheelers sector.
One thing I did learn about EV, I mean, the impact you could have for the environment is a lot less if the charging itself is being, I guess, is being done through fossil fuels, right? So if electricity itself is coming from fossil fuels, then the impact of EV is somewhat negligible because, you've also got then, the batteries themselves creating waste in their own right. Do you see there being a development in terms of renewable energy sources that could then subsequently be used for charging EV batteries?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Very rightly pointed out, Komal. And in fact, today, India does lag behind compared to a lot of developed countries in moving towards renewable sources of energy. We are dependent on fossil fuels to a very large extent, on coal. But glad to see and hear that we are taking the right steps towards moving towards renewables, moving towards solar, moving towards windmill, etc., etc. And all of this will have the true impact of EVs being deployed on the ground. So as they rightly say that if your source is polluting, you are just shifting the pollution actually emitted from from the road to the source of electricity generation. But as we move more towards renewables, I think that problem would also get resolved. But it does address a lot of challenges on the ground in terms of diversification of pollution, congested cities, etc. So that's a very important step. I think all of this has to come together. It will take time, but let's not wait for one thing to happen to do another.
I'd say that, Komal, just one quick comment is that you changed the problem from a distributed problem to a central problem. A centralized problem is usually slightly easier, and there are either technologies or regulatory government forces and corporates who could come together and solve that problem, and it's a singular place where you solve it, and then it solves the problem across the board.
Agree, but I mean that's very contingent on the government of India stepping up, aside from just making noises about it, doing actually, taking concrete action towards renewable sources. And I mean, coming back to your alternate protein fund, Jayesh, the environmental impact. Obviously, if you're going through processing, there's clearly an environmental aspect to that too. How does one defray the other?
Yeah, again, same issue, right? No easy answers to this. It's a question of just continuing to do status quo, which is just not tenable, right? And so in this particular case, as we move forward, and if the technologies take into consideration the fact that it's going to save on gas emissions and it's going to save on arable land and it's going to save on water, right? So I think that combination of benefits really completely far outweighs some of the issues of processes or even things that are going to be on the packages which you can't recognize. But even today, right? I mean, if you look at the back of a package of something you buy in a grocery store, you don't recognize some of the stuff, but nobody's questioning it. But suddenly, when old protein happens, then people are starting to point fingers saying, hey, wait a minute, this thing has so many ingredients, but hey, you had it before. So again, I think the regulators have it quite tough coming forward, and there's different regulations in different countries. So US, is okay with GMO. Europe is not. Even if the ingredients in between are GMO and then our output is a natural product at the back end, Europe is not going to allow that. So it's going to be quite tricky. But again, these things sort themselves out.
We're going to transition to the Q&A. I can see quite a few questions coming in, but before we go to that, Jayesh, what would you say if there was something you could do to change this ecosystem for responsible investing? What would you add to that? What would you say could be done?
I'd say that millennials are super connected, right, with mission and purpose. So I wish the patriarchs would listen to them. I wish the seniors would listen to them. Give them allocations from investable assets and decision making, and trust them to make their own responsible decisions, right? So majority of the family offices that invest in our VC fund is because of the millennials in the family explaining and convincing the family to invest in our impact fund. They know this space. They are very knowledgeable about this space. They believe in this space, and so they invest in this space. And so I think if there's one thing is that the patriarch need to shift just this mindset and allow the millennials to engage and come in and allow them to be part of this impact space.
Janvi?
Yes, I think I fully agree with Jayesh. And but apart from that, I think with COVID, a lot of capital and decision makers of capital deployment have realized that chasing only financial returns may not really be viable in the longer run. And sustainable investing holistically is extremely important. And I think COVID is going to trigger a lot of decision makers to move capital towards impact investing.
We all have our fingers crossed and hope so. Over to you, Soumya, for the questions.
Thank you so much, Komal. This was indeed a very, very interesting discussion. Lots of facts and figures. Thanks a lot. So over to the questions. So the first question is, of course, for Jayesh. Startups in India, emerging markets were often said to bring in Me Too models from the West without contextualizing them for their markets. Do you see that lesson now learned with the emerging sectors like alternative protein?
I'd say that these are early days. I have my hope up. If you look at very high tech, high cost technologies like cell-based, probably not, because it's just very early days, and people like America, places like America and Israel are leading. But when you look at things like ingredients, for example, right, John, we talked about millets as well. I think I can see that there's going to be a shift, and India can lead that particular bandwagon. I'd say that in the alternative protein space, also remember that 30% of India is vegetarian, 70% is basically the alternative protein target market. However, it's 1.3 billion people, and so 70% is a massive number. But the taste and the price is going to be so different, and therefore local technology, local ingredients, local taste, and local consumption pattern. I think it's completely open space, and I think that India will innovate in at least as far as a lot of these food ingredients are concerned, because there are two markets, right? There's the urban market and there's the rural market, right? And each of them have different price points. So my sense is that yes, there will be entrepreneurs who will innovate and come up with new products and ideas.
Super. Thank you. So the other question is not addressed to any specific speaker, but I'll read it out. How do you ensure that what is deemed sustainable today will not create other issues in the future? How does responsible investment develop forethought for long-term sustainability?
Maybe I can take a crack at that.
Sure.
Yeah, this is a very tricky one. And in fact, every time we make an investment, we also look at the negative impact that can be created by the investment. And we have to weigh the positives against the negatives, because um, any business, any enterprise, no matter what positive impact it may generate at the back end, there will be some negative. There will be, so if you're talking about digitization of supply chains, organization of supply chains, you would want to cut down the middlemen, right? So while you are impacting the farmers who will benefit because of an organized supply chain, there'll be middlemen who would maybe lose their sources of income. But at the end of it, you have to weigh the positives over the negatives. And I think that I hope answers the question to some extent.
Yes, Jayesh, do you also want to weigh in
No,
here?
that's fine. No, that's fine. Go ahead.
Okay, super. So the other question again is on, how do you help shift mindset as responsible investor to encourage consumers, especially environmentally, socially conscious one, to consume alternative products such as the ones you've talked about?
Yeah, I mean that's a very tricky one, right? Because the whole consumption pattern, right, of a country or a specific geographic region is extremely difficult to shift. So for us, venture capital fund, right, we can invest in some of these companies and hope that they will build the brand and they will make sure that the consumption pattern is based on the nutrition and the proteins that are in it and the price parity in it, etc. I don't think that we individually can really reflect anything on it other than, of course, help them build these brands and help them make sure that the promotions are done in a very balanced, justified way. But beyond that, it's a super difficult thing to shift consumption patterns from the old school to the new school. The only hope again is the millennials, right? So millennials will help us show a shift in the whole marketplace.
Great.
And maybe I can add a point to this. This is what we saw in Soulful as well. When you talk about environment, socially conscious brands, etc., there's only a small fraction of the entire population who would want to, experiment or buy these products because of these reasons. But the major chunk of the target market would want to buy the products because of taste, price, and availability. And hence, even as brands in these spaces scale, I think communication to the target customers over and above the social and environmental impact has to cater to the needs of those target markets, and that's what impact investing actually is.
Right. We
So
have.
Sorry, I was going to add to that. I think trends make a big difference. If millennials create a particular trend, then there's a herd mentality around it. And that also will result in change in consumer patterns. So that's something that's important to bear in mind. It may be an urban trend to begin with, but there's nothing, with proliferation of technology these days, it's very easy for an urban trend to also become a rural one.
Right. Right. So we answered this question from a consumer perspective. Now the question is around, when you talk about creating sustainable and alternative agro products, how do you see it how do you see its possibility of mass adoption? And since one of the parameter for mass adoption might be economical pricing, how do you believe farmers would bring this behavioral change towards sustainable crops?
Yeah, I think I did touch upon it when I was talking about Soulful.
Right.
But maybe elaborating a little bit more. Unless and until there is a market pull for those crops, farmers will not shift to growing those crops, no matter what you tell them. So it has to make economic sense to all the stakeholders in the ecosystem for any material difference to happen on the ground.
Right.
Also, please remember that as the space develops, the alternative protein space develops, and if the ingredients, right, new ingredients, novel ingredients come up, that shift will have to happen, right? I mean, if people are shifting to peas and soys and oats and millets, right? I mean, then there will be a shift because the demand is going to shift, the pricing is going to shift, and the farmers are reasonably smart to recognize the trends, as Mohan was mentioning. So my sense is, that obviously the big agro companies will also influence the farm. But I recognize also that it's a small piece. The supply chain is very important, but it's a very small piece of the total cost, right, of the final product.
Right. The next question is from Anna. She's quite surprised that we claim same IRR is possible in impact investing. From her experience investing in businesses for BOP consumers, it takes much longer to reach those level of profitability, and selling affordable goods makes it a challenge. So we usually have issues finding co-investors ready to engage in slower growing social business. So any comment, Jayesh, Komal, Jan?
Yeah. So look, this is a perennial problem. So on one side, you have nonprofit, right? So there is zero economics. On one side, you have 100% economics, zero impact. World is somewhere between 0 and 100, right? So if you're leaning more towards 30% of, you're doing economics at 70% impact, there might be difficulties because there's a degree of difficulty, which is challenging as far as making it economically sustainable or profitable. And then if you go to the other side, there are maybe 60, 70% economics, 20, 30% impact products or services, where of course investors are all ganging towards. So if you look at edutech and health tech and even like say alt protein, hopefully in the future, then people are just drifting towards that. If you're opening an education institute in some place in the northeast hinterlands of India, you might get less people, but then recognize that there are people who are also shifting from non-profit. So completely 100% zero profit, non-profit guys are now allocating a little bit of their money, and maybe they are more in tune with what Anna's trying to do. But absolutely, it's a perennial problem. Unfortunately, IRR is just different things for different people, right? So if it's a health sector VC, then it's a different IRR, and things in food tech is a different IRR, and environment tech is a different IRR, edu tech is different IRR. So, but within that sector, right, is there some parity? And that's what we are saying. Is that we've by and large now in the last 20 years experience is that yes, impact can produce, at least on a fund level. Right? On an individual angel investor, you have to be very careful. You invest in 1 or 2 or 3 and then you hold. It may or may not work, right? Again, just like normal tech angel investing, impact tech angel investing is no different.
Right. Thanks, Jayesh, for the elaborate answer. So do we see a role of social or development impact bonds in any blended finance structure? That's the next question. Jayesh.
So I'll put myself on mute on this one. Komal, I think you might be the
I mean, I would definitely say that as you go into something more innovative, especially where there's a pool of philanthropic capital needed to get the space going for investment, that's where blended finance may have a role to play. And often blended finance is a precursor to the more conventional impact investing, then subsequently leading to mainstream investing. So blended finance sometimes ends up being the first step because you have philanthropists coming in, being prepared to take the first loss, or being prepared to take that concessional return that Anna was referring to before it's ready for that mainstream investor who is actually looking for a return of capital plus a return of coupon on top.
Right. Thank you, Komal. Jayesh, 2 questions for you. One is, since most of the attention thus far has been for meat alternatives, what's the potential you see for alternative protein with respect to seafood, given the coastal importance for Asia Pacific? The second question is from Shashwat. In your view, what makes alternative protein a startup space rather than a big FMCG space? Okay,
so I'll first take the meat versus seafood. Look, meat is a very American thing, right? So hamburger, I mean, that's an American thing. I think that US is leading the pack right now. And so you can see a lot of meat-based and alternative meat-based companies, whether it's beef or pork or etc. That's in the United States. But when you come to Asia, seafood is the biggest consumption, right, in terms of the alternative protein. So I think that you will see that shift. There are people who are currently working on, let's say, things like crab, for example, things like maw, right, things like that, but fish maw. But I think that over time, I think you'll see that shift even in US. So currently, of course, meat is leading the pack. But I see that if you go back and you look at the total market size of meat versus seafood versus chicken versus dairy versus eggs, each one of them has a potential. I mean, look, dairy is already shifting, right? The consumption pattern in America, right? Or, I've heard numbers like 14% of dairy products are becoming alt dairy products now. So I think that seafood definitely is a big thing, and there are a lot of companies like Shiok Meat and Avant Meats who are working on that particular product set. As far as startup is concerned, I think it's just pretty much almost like the internet, the days of internet. If you see early stage startups, the technology that they're working on, so there is a company called Lipid, which is working on plant-based fats, right? So the taste comes from fats for the meats. And so they're working on fats. People are working on scaffolding. So there are early stage startups, which are valuations of 5 million, 10 million. Some of them are coming from incubators like IndieBio. And so a lot of these companies are just similar to when in the internet space, right in the early days. And then, of course, there are late stage companies, but over the last 3 to 5 years, 7 years, like these people like Oatly and Beyond Meat and Impossible have become as big as they have. And of course, also strategics like Cargill and Tyson and Nestle and Unilever and all these guys are starting to invest, but they're looking for these young companies to start growing. And so you'll see funding also the same way. So it'll be pre-seed, seed, then Series A, Series B, and then now you'll see Series E, F, and then public list IPOs. Oatly just went public, right? So I think it's fairly similar to most other sectors. I don't think in alternative meat, one can say that the early stage startups can't participate in it. I think definitely there is a huge room for that. So entrepreneurs most welcome. Please look at this sector.
Great. So we are almost nearing the close of this session. Can we take 2 more questions and then wrap it up? Is that okay?
Sure.
Sure. Okay, super. So there's actually 2 questions for you, Janvi. For funds like AVMS that haven't considered energy as a priority sector until now, does that now change with the evolving sentiment towards EV tech, and what caused the shift? The second is, does Aavishkaar assign a target financial and impact return prior to making investments?
Sure. So I'll take the first one first. So, Aavishkaar has, apart from social impact, also been looking at climate impact. And we have made investments in the climate space in the past. And NEPRA is a successful example from there, which is into waste management. And talking specifically about EV and EV technology, so we've been looking at this sector for fairly long now. I mean, for the last 3-4 years, we've been tracking the sector quite closely. The reason why we've not made an investment so far was that commercial viability and adoption in the sector, had not really come up the curve. And it's now that we believe that various aspects of the ecosystem are coming together, and it is now the right time for a fund like ourselves to probably get into the sector.
Super.
And you asked another question regarding financial and impact returns. Yes, absolutely. For us, the business model, the financial viability returns that we could generate in terms of from our exits are as important as the impact that the company generates. And as I shared earlier, impact KPIs is something we create right at the beginning of our investment. It's a part of our diligence, and we track them, monitor them on an ongoing basis, and we report them to our investors regularly. And that's as important as financial returns.
Sure. Thanks, Janvi. There's a question from Meera. Do any, if you look at water and sanitation space as linked to health impact, so say a sanitation impact bond, I'm not really sure of the question, but if anyone wants to answer this.
Maybe I can take that. So with regards to sanitation being linked to health, very strong correlation, obviously. I mean, we've also made an investment in this sector in the past. We'd invested in a company which was into portable toilets. They were into offering these toilets on rent over AMCs, etc., and servicing them. And especially in an India scenario where sanitation facilities are so limited, it has a very, very strong correlation with health of especially women who do not go to work, who do not go to school because they don't have toilets there. So, so offering these sort of services is quite essential to ensure them being healthy and being employed and educated as well. When it comes to bonds, probably Komal may have a view there. But Aavishkaar Capital is an equity investor and not yet ventured into bonds.
Again, one of those spaces where, as I said, the blending is important. Philanthropy comes in first. And, you need people who are prepared to take risks on the sector. I don't know, if it would subsequently, as Janvi said, once you've got that blending, you have the ability for so someone like Aavishkaar to come in and invest subsequently as an equity investor, and be prepared to take that, some kind of senior tranche as opposed to a junior tranche, which a blended finance investor would take. But yeah, there's so many questions coming through the chat. I think we could continue, but this has been really wonderful. Thank you so much, Jayesh and Janvi. I've thoroughly enjoyed it and learned a lot from both of you as well. And thank you, Soumya and Aavishkaar, for facilitating us.
Thank you
for
so
having
much.
us. Yeah, thank you for having us.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to Komal, Jayesh, Janvi for throwing some very interesting perspective on impact investing strategies, emerging sectors on plant protein, electric mobility, and interesting statistics as well presented and insights, and sharing some very interesting anecdotes as well on how we've been able to achieve impact and return. Thank you to each and